Allow me to start by thanking Tom Donahue for his legendary leadership of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and Nisha Biswal, the president of the U.S.-India Business Council, on whose board I'm honored to serve. Well, good morning and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It has been a great honor to introduce the opening of the U.S.-India Business Council's IDEA Summit discussing leadership in times of crisis. We are living in an increasingly complicated time as the world is battling to contain a global pandemic, dealing with global security challenges, and faces the urgent need to address a rapidly changing climate. World leader needs to come together now more than ever to lead us through these multiple simultaneous crises. These cannot happen without close cooperation between the world's two largest democracies, the United States and India. Over the last 25 years, India's influence regionally and globally has risen while its relationship with the United States has evolved and strengthened. This has led to a deepening of intelligence and security cooperation and expanding bilateral trade in energy, goods, and services. To overcome these challenges we face today, this alliance must now grow even stronger, not only for our two countries, but to provide the global leadership we all so desperately need today. That is why I'm excited to introduce the speakers today for today's panel who are best placed to address these issues. Our two speakers and moderators are well known to all of us. Dr. Jaishankar, currently serving as Minister of External Affairs, is a decorated career diplomat, having served as ambassador to the United States, as well as to China, the Czech Republic, and Singapore. He also served in the private sector, working for Tata as the president of Global Corporate Affairs. Senator Mark Warner currently serves as the vice chair of the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee and the co-chair of the India Caucus in the Senate. Prior to his role in the U.S. Senate, Senator Warner was the governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, where he was credited for the Commonwealth's economic recovery. When he left office in 2006, Virginia was ranked as the best state for business, the best managed state, and the best state in which to receive a public education. Prior to his national political roles, Mark Warner spent 20 years as a successful technology and business leader. And in full disclosure, I was also honored to serve as Senator Warner's advisor. Finally, the moderator for today's panel is Stephen Hadley, who served as President George W. Bush's National Security Advisor, and immediately prior to that served as the Deputy National Security Advisor. He also served as Assistant Secretary of Defense during the George H.W. Bush administration, and today is a partner at Rice, Hadley, Gates, and Manuel. Mr. Hadley is also the board chair of the United States Institute of Peace and is the executive vice chair of the board of directors of the Atlantic Council. I look forward to listening to this panel.
Good morning and good evening. The Ideas Summit is about innovation, creativity, and big thinking in the U.S.-China relationship. And we have two speakers here who are not only visionaries, but they are also key implementers in developing this critically important relationship. This year's summit, of course, is focused on building a better future. But as Amos described, the present has rarely been more challenging. So Minister Jaishankar, let me speak and start with you. Where can the United States and India best cooperate in meeting all the manifold challenges we have today? And what are the principal ways in which India and the United States can work together to build a better future for all of us?
Well, thank you. And let me begin by greeting everybody at the other end. Good morning to all of you. It's wonderful to see so many of you. Steve, I would say, there are two big basket of issues that we should be looking at. These are the two drivers, in fact, in the last 20 years of a stronger relationship. One is the geopolitical basket. The other is people ties. Each one is a game changer in themselves. They reinforce each other. They have in the last 20 years. And I think they have the potential to actually create a very durable relationship between India and the United States. Now, to do that, let me start with the geopolitical side. I think the U.S. really has to learn to work in a sense, with a more multipolar world with more plurilateral arrangements, go beyond alliances with which really it has grown up over the last 2 generations. Now, it would be, I'm now specifically referring to India, given our history of independence and the fact that we really are coming from different places. There will be issues on which our convergence would be more, somewhere it would be less. I think the quest in the last 20 years, and I see that continuing into the future, is really to find more common ground. Now, I think Amos, in his initial remarks, spoke about working together in changing the world. And I think we have the ability today, by working together, to shape the world. We are working on maritime security, counter-terrorism, connectivity, how to respond in the case of Corona to pandemics, even issues like climate change, the knowledge economy. So I think a large part of it is how do we actually, while strengthening our bilateral agenda, shape a larger agenda. And my own sense, having worked with many previous administrations and the current one, actually, intuitively, American administrations have been going down that way, looking really how to engage countries like India more effectively. We've seen that results, and perhaps they did so less consciously in the past. They now need to do it more purposefully. So that's the geopolitical side. On the people-to-people side, look, when India became independent, there were 3,000 Indian Americans living in the United States. Today, there are more than 4 million, and perhaps a few million more Indian citizens on non-immigrant visas. Now, what that has done is, it has given a new quality to that relationship. It's created the image, the branding of the relationship, a completely new network, including, we see that, I'm sure, Senator, you'd agree with me, particularly in respect of the Congress. But most of all, it has created a bonding between the two societies. And to my mind, how to nurture this bonding, and it's a bonding which is today very much centered around talent, talent that is so central to our economy, to innovation, to technology, to our relationship in that sense. So if we are looking at what I would call a globalized knowledge economy world, to my mind, some of the key answers, the principles on which we should be building this relationship, is really to recognize and build on trusted talent and on creating more resilient supply chains on which both of us participate.
Thank you so much. Let me turn to Senator Warner, if I could. Senator, how could elevating the U.S.-India partnership contribute to a better future? And what would an elevated U.S.-India partnership look like in your view?
Well, thank you, Steve. And again, let me echo what others have said. Good morning and good evening. Minister, it is great to see you again. I have very fond memories of your time as India's ambassador to the United States. Let me say I start this as still the proud vice co-chair of the U.S.-India Caucus. At 41 members of the Senate, we are the largest bilateral caucus in the Congress, and proud of that strong and inviting relationship between our two countries. I also want to particularly give a shout out as well for all of the USIBC and all the great work that you've done for so many, many years. I want to build on the minister's comments and really talk about 4 areas, 3 of which I think I've probably raised in the past, a 4th that I think will increasingly be a key metric in how the U.S.-India relationship moves forward. First, echoing on the minister's comments, I think we need to continue to build upon the people-to-people relationship. We see it with the Indian American diaspora being extraordinarily strong here in the United States and taking an elevated role not only in business, politics, the arts, media. That's terribly important in terms of that kind of people-to-people connectivity. Related to that is, I think it's very important in an area where I disagree with the administration in their efforts to push back on foreign students studying in America. We have over 200,000 Indian students studying in America. I think that strengthens our ties. We have over 4,000 American students studying in India. I would like to see those numbers on both sides go up. Secondly, and this has been an area that has been a focus of a number of administrations, we need to continue to increase trade between our two countries. Those numbers have gone up dramatically. We continue to need to enforce that. Third, we need greater cooperation on the defense side. And again, India has, in terms of military purchases, has dramatically increased the amount of military hardware it purchases from the United States. We've seen joint military exercises, all I think extremely important. Right now, John Cornyn and I are trying to get an amendment into the Defense Authorization Act that would move India as regards to exchange of technology and defense technology into the highest non-NATO category, move India beyond, amend the Export Control Act to move India into the category that the United States has with countries like Australia and New Zealand, other key allies. India should be included in that categorization, and it's our strong hope that that could be included in this year's Defense Authorization Act. And then finally, and this I will spend more time, I think, in the second question, but I believe that the United States and indirectly the West, and I include India in that category vis-a-vis the West, that we have presumed that every major technological innovation, almost post-Sputnik, was either invented in America, or if not invented in America, America usually drove the standards, rules, protocols, and procedures as that new technology was rolled out. You can go through telecommunications, you can go through the question around the internet, you can go through overhead, area after area. We're seeing that national and international leadership now threatened by a very aggressive Chinese Communist Party and President Xi Jinping. And I'm a former telecom guy. We're seeing this play out right now in 5G, where it is, in many cases, Chinese standards, Chinese rules, Chinese protocols that are dominating in 5G, or were on the path to dominating in 5G, and a Chinese national champion in the case of Huawei trying to dominate the world market, where China allows a level of competition in their own market, a national champion then emerges, and that national champion is then backed with the full force and power of the Communist Party to try to achieve a level of domination around the whole world. I think 5G has woken a lot of folks to the idea that what China's trying to do in 5G, they may try to do in artificial intelligence, quantum computing. And if you look at the China 2025 document, you can see a number of other areas of technology where they hope to have dominance. And I think this presents a new opportunity for alliances, in a sense, around an alliance of the willing, based perhaps not just on economic issues or military issues, but around technology issues. And I think this offers an enormous, enormous opportunity for India and the United States to be some of the core partners in this new alliance of the willing around technological innovation. We see a great deal of this innovation going on in India. We obviously see a great deal of it going on in the United States. I know our friends, the British, have called for kind of almost a 10-country alliance of major countries, including India. I think this idea of countering the Communist Party of China's rise and desire to dominate new technologies may be a chance for a new set of cooperation between India and the United States based on these technology alliances. And I'll have more to say about that, and I think in future questions.
Thank you, Senator. I do want to come back to that. But for the moment, I want to go back to the minister and pick up the second of the three areas you identified for increased cooperation, that of trade. We know that trade can be contentious, and there are issues that need to be addressed. On the one hand, U.S.-India trade has grown remarkably to now $142 billion from about $100 billion in just 215. On the other hand, we see U.S. concerns about market access, tariffs, e-commerce policy, or data localization requirements. And India has concerns about Section 232 tariffs, H-1B visa policy, and other issues. So, Mr. Minister, how can we resolve these issues, and should we be aiming higher rather than simply working on the existing irritants in the relationship? Is a free trade agreement, for example, between the United States and India something that India is interested in and something that the two countries ought to make as a priority going forward?
Steve, yesterday, I think my colleague, the Trade Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, actually addressed some of these issues. He described the discussions which are taking place between him and USTR. So I don't want to qualify or reiterate really what he said, but I want to make a look. I understand the importance, not just the importance, the almost the centrality of economic relations, because at the end of the day, I mean, even if I didn't learn it as a diplomat, believe me, I learned it in the Tatas. These are bread and butter issues. These are really what make countries deal with each other. But I think between India and the United States, while we work through trade issues, we need to think bigger. In terms of trade, I would say the last few years have been dominated by a conversation about your complaints and our complaints, and depending on where you sit, it looks a little bit different. My sense is it's in our mutual interest, and I know Mr. Goyal stated that very clearly, that we need to resolve the these pending problems and move on to something bigger. I think there's a lot of interest here in doing that. But beyond trade, there is a much bigger connect between our two countries, which is a sort of a knowledge innovation connect. I think Senator Warner also referred to it. And if you look at where the world is going, I think beyond an exchange of goods and creating better investment climates for each other, this ability to work together in the world of innovation and technology, I think that is really what will set our relationship apart. There, it is vital that we have a sort of a very strong convergence on the big picture. That we see the world, the landscape looks similar to us, aspirations are more shared. I think definitely in all of this, values do matter, because at the end of the day, when you work on technology, on innovation, on knowledge, trust and confidence are very, very important factors. So I would give a lot of emphasis to resolving our trade problems, trying to take the the journey into a higher gear than it has been before. I do believe it's very possible, because I'm very wired to what's going on the trade side. But I'd make one other point, which is, look, India is also changing. Okay, there are new capabilities which are emerging in India. There are domains where today we have a presence and a mastery which we may not have had some years earlier. So in a sense, a lot of our conversations reflect the conversation. It's a sort of a rebalancing of the world economy conversations, where up and coming players have somewhat different concerns than established players. Established players obviously want, in many cases, the advantages which work for them currently to continue in the long run. I think it would be fair to accommodate the legitimate concerns of emerging economies, emerging companies, emerging technologies, and that harmonization, how well we do that, I think that's a very important part of our relationship building. And there, I believe that organizations like USIBC can play a very critical role.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Senator, I want to come back to you and give you a chance to talk a little bit more about this technology issue, but I want to frame it in this way. It's clear that U.S. and Indian companies are increasingly becoming linked to one another through trade, cross-border investment, technology flows. Both economies are looking to advanced technologies and merging new industries, and both are grappling with the problems of how to regulate some of these advanced technologies and emerging industries in a way that balance correctly, encouraging innovation, but the appropriate kind of government oversight. You're someone who has worked both as an investor in technology and now someone who's called for greater oversight and regulation in some key areas. How do we strike the right balance between innovation and oversight? And is this something the United States and India can work together on, since both are faced with this challenge?
Well, Steve, I think it's you ask a critically important question. And I would argue that particularly as it comes to technology, and I know we've had some challenges around the data localization issue, and that has frustrated me sometimes. I would add that while I've disagreed with the Indian position on data localization, I've been very supportive of, for example, raising the cap on H-1Bs, the S-386 legislation for our Indian colleagues. And I almost feel like if we take a moment, the issue around data localization really builds out of the whole question around social media, around data platforms. And I would argue in many ways, our problem right now has been traditionally America would have already set the rules, procedures, protocols, and standards for an emerging technology like the social media platforms, for example. The fact that we have not done that and ceded privacy legislation to the Europeans with GDPR and failure to deal with content regulation on Section 230. And now again, we have the Brits and the Australians and the French doing something, or our own states individually, like California, doing something on privacy, I think means America needs to step back and I believe, hopefully reassert some level of the kind of leadership that I think, frankly, the rest of the world would welcome when we see a extraordinarily well-planned and, unfortunately, I believe, fairly well-executed strategy by the Communist Party of China. And my beef, let me be clear, is not with China or the Chinese people or Chinese Americans. It is with the Communist Party of China, where they have basically used their technology companies, the Huawei's, the Alibabas, the Badus, and Tencents, as arms of their government. They have used it to create a surveillance state that I think has become an export capability of China. And I think it really then says to countries like India, and we see India and China rubbing into each other with their border dispute, but really has kind of shocked the world into saying, okay, we need an alternative. And when it comes to things like 5G, it really was the Japanese and the Koreans and the Australians who raised the alarm before the Americans did. But I would take, for example, an area like 5G, where the next step may be so-called ORAN networks, open radio access networks. I've got legislation that is about to be put into law, again, in the Defense Authorization Bill, that would say America ought to be investing in this and ought to have a multinational investment vehicle where we could absolutely partner with India on ORAN to make sure there is a competitor, an international-based competitor, Huawei. I think we're going to need the same kind of collaboration on artificial intelligence. I think we ought to have the same kind of collaboration on quantum computing. I think there's a host of areas in the life sciences, and obviously the international race now for a vaccine on COVID. All of these present opportunities for American leadership, and I think American collaboration with India, as the minister said. The intellectual capital in India and the innovative nature of the Indian economy is a perfect partner for the United States to join with India and our traditional partners in Europe and in East Asia to present an alternative, because my fear otherwise is we will have a circumstance where there will be a Chinese champion in each of these areas. That Chinese champion will get basic dominance of the Chinese market that may equate to 25 to 30% of the world market. And then that Chinese champion will receive basically unlimited financial backing, $100 billion in the case of Huawei, and to go out and have a non-price sensitive approach to trying to take on the rest of the world. And quite honestly, I'm not sure there's any single American company or any single Indian company or Japanese company or French company that can go against that semi-state sponsored capitalism that China is trying to export. So let's work together on innovation. Let's work together and make sure that the standards that come around new innovation reflects the kind of democratic values, rule of law values that both India and the United States represents. And I think this coalition of the willing around technology could be a wonderful place for increased United States-India collaboration.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that. I'm afraid we're out of time. This has been a terrific conversation. We'll probably have to leave it there on the theme of increased U.S.-India cooperation. I want to thank Senator Warner and Minister Jaishankar for their time today, and more importantly, for their leadership on these critical issues that are so important for our two countries. We appreciate everyone who tuned in today. Appreciate your interest in this topic and look forward to continuing this conversation in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and of course, good evening to everyone. That was a fascinating conversation that Steve Hadley led with Senator Warner and, of course, Foreign Minister Jaishankar. Terrific conversation, and is a tribute to the entire forum that's been on for the last 2 days. This summit, this U.S.-IBC India Ideas Summit, has already really proven to be a policy and thought leadership platform to reflect on the goals and ambitions of the U.S.-India partnership and to really understand and act on the future outlook of this relationship. You heard the Senator and the Foreign Minister talked about a wide range of areas where India and the United States can strengthen and develop further cooperation. We all recognize this is really a complex time in our life, ones that require the United States to lead, but also to closely coordinate with trusted partners across the world to meet the challenges we face together. This is not only about global coordination and in responding to a health crisis, but really also about how we collaborate on a plan for recovery. International trade is clearly a critical, indispensable factor in the recovery plan. And I would just say that there are many other elements, however, that need to be taken into consideration as we think about the recovery plan. But here at the U.S. Chamber, we strongly believe in the spirit of free enterprise and in the market that will create jobs, advance economic connectivity, and foster an environment of innovation and entrepreneurship. We stand by these principles across all the markets we work with. India has become an important and growing partner in the mission of free enterprise, and India is really on a steadfast trajectory of substantial reforms that the private sector in India and the United States very much want to engage in and advance. The progress of India is reflected in the global role that Indian businesses have embraced, investing over $22 billion spread across United States cities and states. As the global economy grapples with responding to the outbreak of the coronavirus and significant disruptions in the global supply and value chains, the relationship between the United States and India has really gained in prominence. As we look to advance this relationship, it will be important to address key topics that industries and others have top in mind. COVID-19 disruptions, for example, have openly exposed the cracks in established supply chains and caused many to think about the need to de-risk. India represents both challenges and opportunities that must be addressed in this regard. It is clear that the Indo-Pacific, a region that generates a third of the world's economic output, will be critical to the interests of not only America's national security, but becoming increasingly an important part of our economic growth strategy as well. And that is why the American business community is so invested in India's future. Businesses are keenly interested to hear about key areas of growth that can support the stronger U.S.-India partnership in the Indo-Pacific, as well as geopolitical considerations that drive U.S. policy in this complex region. As we think about the future of economic ties between India and the United States and the ways that it will develop, not just in services, but in manufacturing and many other ways, I want to remind us all to think about what the Foreign Minister just said, Jaishankar. What he talked about was having aspirations that go well beyond one tenet of the relationship. But clearly, we believe that trade is an important engine and foundation in this U.S.-India relationship. And there's really no one better positioned from the U.S. standpoint right now to address these topics and many others in our next guest, the U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. The Secretary has acted decisively to advance the U.S.-India partnership, launching a 2+2 dialogue with his good friend, Foreign Minister Jaishankar, in engaging with India and other partners in the Quad to support economic development across the Indo-Pacific. We appreciate his leadership here at home and his leadership around the world. And we support his efforts to engage in the Indo-Pacific in strategic ways that will advance our commercial, but also our broader strategic interest in the region. And he launched it with the help of others at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce just 2 years ago. We are delighted, let me underscore that, we are delighted the U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, has agreed to offer remarks for this forum. Now let's hear from Secretary Pompeo.
Time that many of us met in Washington right before my visit to New Delhi. That trip deepened the partnership between our two countries immensely. I know you're used to hearing that we're the oldest and most populous democracies in the world. That's true, and it's important. It's important to reiterate. We share a reverence for freedom, rule of law, and human rights that runs deep, and that's important. As I said in Delhi, the United States desires a new age of ambition in our relationship. We don't just interact on a bilateral basis. We see each other for what we are: great democracies, global powers, and really good friends. India is one of a few trusted, like-minded countries whose leaders I call on a regular basis for counsel and collaboration on issues that span continents. I'm grateful in particular to Minister Jaishankar for his friendship and for his sage advice. It's important. It's important that democracies like ours work together, especially as we see more clearly than ever the true scope of the challenge posed by the Chinese Communist Party. Our infrastructure projects, our supply chains, our sovereignty, and our people's health and safety are all at risk if we get it wrong. The recent clashes initiated by the PLA are just the latest examples of the CCP's unacceptable behavior. We were deeply saddened by the deaths of 20 Indian service members. I'm confident that with our concerted efforts, we can protect our interests. I especially commend India's recent decision to ban 59 Chinese mobile apps, including TikTok, that present serious security risks for the Indian people. And I'm happy to report that India is a rising U.S. defense and security partner in the Indo-Pacific and globally. In December, Defense Secretary Esper and I hosted the second ever 2+2 dialogue with our Indian counterparts. The United States has never been more supportive of India's security. India, too, is an important partner in a key pillar of President Trump's foreign policy: multilateralism that actually works. We work closely together to make sure that the World Intellectual Property Organization election was won by someone who respects property rights. Seems pretty basic. We've revived the so-called Quad, comprised of the U.S., India, Japan, and Australia. India is also part of a group of like-minded nations that I've convened regularly to advance shared interests. We've also invited Prime Minister Modi to the next G7, where we'll advance the Economic Prosperity Network. It's a group of countries and organizations that we consider natural partners because we share values like democracy and transparency and the rule of law. On a similar note, India has a chance to attract global supply chains away from China and reduce its reliance on Chinese companies in areas like telecommunications, medical supplies, and others. India is in this position because it has earned the trust of many nations around the world, including the United States. We also want to work with India to advance the Blue Dot Network, an initiative to promote high-quality, transparent infrastructure development. This effort is crucial to adopt because free markets are the best way to lift people out of poverty. India has seen that in its own recent past. That's an especially vital truth to remember today, because the private sector will be indispensable in overcoming the economic damage caused by the pandemic that began in Wuhan, China. But, as I said last year, to achieve these worthy goals, India will need to encourage an environment that is more open to increased trade and investment. I know that's possible because Indians and Americans share a spirit of hard work and entrepreneurship, and I'm confident our partnership is only getting stronger. Let's emerge from this current challenge more resilient and innovative than before. And let's seize this moment to deepen cooperation between two of the world's greatest democracies. Thanks for having me today. Have a wonderful rest of your summit.